A Tiny Revolution features adults having adult conversations, which means that adult language is probably going to be present, just so you know. Hey there, you're listening to A Tiny Revolution, a podcast about ordinary people living revolutionary lives. I'm Kevin Garcia. Welcome to another episode. I am just thrilled to be back in the mode of just creating again. I took a break for a while. If you didn't know that, you can go over to my YouTube page and check that out. Also, my production value has stepped its game up, honey. I just learned a new software. I have new projects coming out. So before we get into the conversation today, let me hit you with the announcements. If you're listening to this on Wednesday, November 14th, first of all, happy birthday to me. I turned 29 today when this is coming out. I am so thrilled to be old as shit. I'm not really old as shit. I'm just getting into my 30s, and that's a little scary. But things you can do today if you are like wanting to feel generous. Of all, my friend Frankie is my barber, an amazing guy. He is currently working towards his gender confirmation surgery and needs a little bit of help getting there. So if you go over to thekevingarcia.com/Frankie, it's going to take you to a website where you can donate to his fund. We're looking to raise around $4,000-ish to $5,000-ish to really help offset the cost because, you know, no insurance out in these streets mean that you have to pay for this shit on your own. And so if you are feeling generous today, for my 29th birthday, I would love for you to go to thekevingarcia.com/Frankie, which is FRANKIE, and donate. Just donate $29 for my 29th birthday to this amazing human. Honestly, Frankie's journey began around the same time as mine. And since I've known Frankie, we've both really become the people like I have become a lot more femme. Frankie started tea and is just, I know that he's somebody who I think is very special to me. So if you're feeling generous today, which you should always be feeling generous because we're the body of Christ, because what we have like around 1,000 listeners an episode. So if everybody on this podcast gave, $29 today, we would more than double the amount that we need, and it would help with not only the surgery but the recovery process as well. So again, donate today. Go to thekevingarcia.com/Frankie. Donate to my friend. I love you so much. Second announcement, 2. There is a sale/giveaway going on with Queerly Beloved Tees. Yes, I talk about it all the time. I'm trying to revamp that, but girl, I, again, have stepped up my production value. So right now, everything from Queerly Beloved is on sale, and if you go follow Queerly Beloved and tag one of your friends on there, you'll be in it for a chance to win a shirt of your own. So go ahead and go to Queerly Beloved Tees on Instagram, follow us, and tag somebody, and maybe you'll win a free shirt. And if you want to snag some cute shirts, they're on sale right now. And you can go to thekevingarcia.com, click on the merch button, and it'll take you right there. Third announcement, I know we've got a lot going on. I'm going to be at the Q Christian Fellowship Conference this year doing 3 different things. I'm going to be leading worship again this year. I feel very fortunate, so shout out to Tash Holmes for asking me to come on board for that once again. And then we've got my talk that I'm giving, which is called Let's Talk About Sexual Ethics. And I'm going to be talking about sex and how we do it and how we do it. I'm going to talk about how to do sex. Just kidding. But we're going to be talking about how we navigate sex, how we talk about sex, relationships, marriage, the whole 9 yards. I am thrilled to be coming to QCF and bringing this talk with me. And the other thing I'm doing is a Tiny Revolution live. My first live show ever, you guys. I can't believe it. I don't know who I'm going to ask or talk with or what we're going to do yet, but like it's going to be phenomenal. So I hope that you come and see and hang out, and it's going to be brilliant. I cannot wait. You can get all of that information over at qchristian.org. Go ahead and register, get your hotels, get your plane tickets, and I'll see you in January, babe, in Chicago. It's going to be so cold. Ugh. I was there last year for the TRP conference, and honey, chilly. Me and my peacoat are going to be best friends. Let's see. And I guess that segues nicely into my conversation today with who we're talking to, which is one of the keynote speakers at Q Christian this year, the fantastic, the amazing Jennifer Knapp. If you don't know who Jennifer Knapp is a Grammy-nominated artist. She is a writer, she's a speaker, she's an activist, and she was CCM royalty for a long time. She took a hiatus, went to Australia, was sorting her shit out, and then when she came back on the music scene, she actually came out of the closet before it was cool to come out as a queer Christian. Amazing woman. The conversation we had was delightful, and I can't wait to share it with you. When she's not doing music or doing advocacy work on behalf of the LGBTQ people of faith, in her organization, Inside Out Faith, she's working on her master's degree in theological studies at Vanderbilt Divinity School. Jennifer's most recent album, Love Comes Back Around, is so stinking good. Go listen to it on Spotify, buy it on iTunes, wherever you listen to it. I'm done talking. This conversation is just a delight. We talk about Christianity, why we're still Christians, if we're still Christians, what does it look like? We talk about the Wesleyan Quadrilateral. Like, we get into a lot of like really cool stuff. So I hope that you really enjoy this conversation with my friend Jennifer Knapp. Back in the day when I was a good Christian man, before I became a bad Christian woman, I was listening to the Relevant podcast way back in the day when you I think you were on the cover of Relevant.
Yeah, a couple of times, I think. At least once, yeah.
Yeah, and they were talking about, you were on hiatus in Australia, and they were interviewing you about your new album. And then, 2 weeks later, you came out, and they had, a follow-up conversation on the podcast about, if we knew that she was going to come out, we wouldn't have interviewed her. And I'm like, I just kind of laughed to myself.
That was actually a big row. Relevant magazine was really pissed off at me because I did an interview with them prior to that and didn't say anything. And I waited this whole interview. Well, that's kind of the funny thing for me. It was I waited that whole interview for the guy to ask the question. And they never had the balls to do it. And I was just like, I hung up the phone. I was like, that was weird.
Because they probably didn't think two ways about it. It's just like, oh, it's Jennifer Knapp. She's, back from the Australian desert to give us more music.
No, they knew. I mean, I was in Nashville at the time, and I came back, and my partner was with me, and it wasn't a secret. I mean, that's kind of one of the weird things about this is kind of where I laugh. I don't laugh, but it's peculiar about public personalities, right? Putting out press releases about their sexual orientation. I mean, first off, who does that? I mean, it's not a very, I don't know, most of us just don't, get a billboard and go, this is my sexual orientation, and everybody that drive by now knows, it's just, you disclose your, people know you because they know you, and, everybody in my life knew that, I was in a same-sex relationship. And so here, it wasn't a secret when I got to Nashville, but part of that thing was that I'd had these interviews scheduled where I think it was it was the Advocate, CCM Magazine, and Reuters, I think, had these interviews, and they were on a slate. They were on a schedule. And so they were going to do these. They're like, okay, these are really great interviews. We're going to release these at this time. So I wasn't even in control of my own press date, my own press review. But all that being said is, I did do some interviews prior to those interviews, and of the Christian interested ones, it was amazing to me that you could hear them on the line just kind of wanting me to spill the beans and kind of not real comfortable with making the ask.
They didn't want to say hey, are you gay?
Right, exactly. And I can't really explain it. To this day, I'm really fascinated by the kind of courage that it takes for LGBTQ people to have to disclose their own information, right? And I think that's that's gotten better over the last 10, 15 years especially. But the pressure that was on me at that time to disclose, and no one considered, I'd never considered the opportunity that somebody had to ask, and how violent that is, and how it is kind of none of your business. And so I was really actually enjoying enjoying is probably the wrong word. I learned something in that moment about how difficult it is and how private it is, and how we shouldn't really expect that. And that really that really made me have to contemplate like the process that I was going through. Why am I coming out? Why did I want to talk about it? Why was it important for me to disclose? And I think that that moment, even though I kind of, it's a little anecdote to talk about with Relevant Magazine and how they basically accused me of being a liar because I didn't disclose it. I was like, well, that's
you didn't lie about anything though.
Yeah, I never did, but I didn't offer it, and but at the same time, I did take that on board. I was like, gosh, am I lying by not talking about this? And what is the value of whether I disclose or whether I don't disclose, or when and where and how, and all those kinds of things. And hindsight being 2020, I mean, I'm really grateful that I did make the decision to be fully exposed, so to speak. At the same time, to have to do that with the public life that I have was kind of an interesting kind of gauntlet to go through, but it made me deeply appreciate the value of being honest with who I was and who I am with people. That I knew that somehow, like, I was just never going to not be that. But it was just one of those strange things where just like at the same time, like I don't go into a restaurant, full of strangers and go, hello, everybody, I'm here and I'm gay.
You don't? Like,
no,
that's,
I haven't.
See, well, I think you should try it sometime. It's thrilling.
But that's so you'd never heard of me, and that you heard it like on this podcast about how they were basically saying they wouldn't do it.
Well, no, like I heard you. I think you actually, it was like your interview about, I can't remember if it was like you were on the podcast or like they just talked about it, like you being on the cover or something like that. And then I don't know. Either way, I thought it was just like so interesting. And like that's how I figured out who you were, because I didn't grow up listening to like CCM music. I grew up listening to country music because my mother is a Southern woman.
That's only a step above that. You know that, right?
I am absolutely aware of that.
No, I grew up listening to country music as well, so I'm just giving you a hard time.
No, I love it. Listen,
country music fans are like clicking off right now.
They're just like, yeah, yes. Listen, you can put me some old school Alan Jackson, and I'm just,
oh my gosh, yeah.
Oh, it's so good. Alan Jackson, or like really old school, like give me some good Dolly Parton, George Strait, and then if you want to go way far back, Patsy Cline, Walking After Midnight will always have my heart.
I know, right? Like you've nailed like two eras for me that were really awesome. I want to drop a couple of records on you too. Like,
please.
There's a Randy Travis record, and I don't remember the name of it. But I think Digging Up Bones was on it.
Yes.
Clint Black. Clint Black had a record or two in there that I just absolutely adored, and then I was madly a Reba fan as well. Like
Reba is so underrated.
Oh my gosh, there were some really good. I'd have to like kind of trace back how old I was, or look up, look up when the dates were on the songs. As a kid, I don't really remember, but man, there were a few records in there. And then of course the Judds were just. I
mean,
they were like the Indigo Girls for me. Like,
yes,
like the harmonies and everything about it. I loved it growing up, and then I got to junior high, and country was definitely not cool. So I started to kind of branch out a little bit. But I became
like one of those like scenester kids in middle school, because like right around like when I was in middle school, it was like the Avril Lavigne Good Charlotte thing happened, and so I went full wannabe goth. Like it was real cute.
See, that already tells me that you're better with eyeliner than I am.
Oh my gosh. Listen, eyeliner I haven't tried yet, but I will. Like, I can do a basic glam face, for myself. Everyone's like, will you do my makeup? I'm just like, listen, just because I am of the homosexual male variety doesn't mean that I can do your makeup.
It's different when you try and put it on somebody else, though.
Maybe I'll be better at it, because like my makeup will either look really good or like trash, depending on what we're trying to do. I want to say one Reba song that just like gets me. Have you heard the song "You Lie"?
No, I don't. I don't think I know that song.
Man, I'll send you a link after this. Like, go watch it on YouTube. But just like her range, she has a range that just gets shown off so beautifully.
I love her. Yeah, and I just when Whoever's in New England, that was a huge hit for her. Oh my God, I used to weep to that song, even though I had no idea what adultery was like.
It's just, I think betrayal is just like a universal feeling.
Yeah, I think I definitely understood that probably.
Yeah. The other thing, my other connection to you, because like I figured out like you'd come out, I was like, oh, that's interesting, but I was still in the phase of my life where I'm just like, maybe it's okay for other people, but it's not okay for me to be gay. And so still a little weird. But then I found you on, weirdly enough, the Bad Christian podcast. Like, you would come out and were doing an interview with them, and you introduced me via this podcast to the Wesleyan Quadrilateral.
Oh, wow.
So you didn't know that you were preaching, but let me tell you what, you got some souls saved on that one.
I think that might be the first time somebody's actually given me credit for being a bit of a theological nerd.
Well, yeah, there it was. Because I remember like you introducing that, and I'd grown up in evangelical missionary world. And so we were never taught to like, this is how you wrestle with scripture. And so it was,
like the thing I love about that, and just for the sake of people who are like, what are you guys talking about? The Wesleyan Quadrilateral is basically talking about how we engage, right? Like, how do we decide, what is the right path, I suppose, with their theology and with the way they're thinking. And John Wesley came up with this idea that theology is a lot like legs on a table. Like, there are 4 legs on a table. In order to get the whole faith system to stand and work, have everything you put on top of it, these legs have to bear the weight. And those legs are logic and reason, which is kind of in one category. Scripture is another, tradition, and then the 4th is experience. And the thing that I actually really adore, that when I heard that, for me, one of the first things that really made me aware of is this thing that I'd really struggled with my whole life in Christianity, is that my experience had often, when people were talking to me about scripture and what was a right and good Christian thing to do, people always kind of took like reason and experience out of it. Like, your experience doesn't matter. Like
oh yeah, I got told that all the time.
Yeah. And I was like, how can that, it just never made sense to me. Like, how can I just pretend like my life isn't here, and then I'm supposed to, go into this other place without the experiences that I have and the wisdom that I've had, and not just for myself, but the wisdom that others that have added into my life. And at the same time, even though like that's an addition, I think, to the spiritual process, that was really important for me to go, wow, I felt like I got permission to finally utilize those things, right? The other side of it that made me have to, I probably struggled with the most, was this concept of tradition. And because I was like, fuck tradition. Like, tradition is really hurting me, right? And but at the same time, like, understanding that tradition is still, like, for me, I think tradition's a long story, and it never ends in one way. Like, all traditions, there's a key component, or it looks familiar, it's connected in time, but traditions do change. Yes. And they don't necessarily have like massive paradigm shifts, but particularly when you look at the history of Christianity, I mean, we're a wildly different church today than we were, even 30 years ago, let alone 200 or, more years ago. But we still have this fundamental tradition to go back to, the things that are and here's where I kind of get really fun. It's like, to our scripture, to joining together, and the traditions that we have built together, and repeating those again and again actually do build faith, and they build community. But, they're somehow disingenuous if we don't have all of those things brought into. You have to bring all of those things to the table.
There's actually a verse in Proverbs that says something along the lines of just like being a house of new and old treasures. And this is actually something I learned in like the Pentecostal church I grew up in, which for some reason still, not to say that, like, when you look at your past sometimes and you're like, I don't want to look at back that time with any favor. Like, they didn't teach me anything. I learned them. But this is a point where I'm saying, you know what, they actually did give me something nice. So kudos to y'all. But this idea of being a house of new and old treasures constantly comes back to me, of saying, like, like, he would always, like, my pastor would always say, just like, the songs we're singing in worship now, we shouldn't be singing them 5-10 years later, because that's an old treasure. Maybe bring it out for a time, but, like, that's why we're not singing, Lord, I lift your name on high still.
Do people still sing that?
Listen, sometimes I get a wild hair. I'll get a wild hair in my worship circles, and we'll bring it up. But
sometimes sometimes I do cruise down the road, and as loud as I possibly can sing "Joy is the Flag."
Yes,
from the castle of my heart. Oh my God, heart. It drives my partner bonkers. Like, stop it!
I haven't remembered that song in so long. What was the other one? We have this one. It's like the Lord opens up the eyes of the blind, and He raises up those who are down. Do you know the one?
No, I don't.
These are all
I
camp songs for me.
Oh my gosh, you went to camp.
Oh, I got saved at Jesus Camp, honey.
Oh, that's so scary.
Yeah.
The only entrance I ever had into Christian camps is when I was like, first off, I didn't know they existed, and then I was like, I didn't become a Christian until I was like 18 or 19,
Mm.
and so I was getting hired to go do music at some of these camps, and like most of the time I would never stay more than a few hours because I was just like I did not relate to that experience at all.
Oh, no.
I
It's
just felt
weird.
so weird and out of place, and everyone knew like you're talking about like these just hundreds of songs that everyone just knew passionately, and I didn't feel like I fit in because I didn't know these songs. And then what was worse is I didn't like a lot of them. So
Because
like,
a lot of them are just not good.
yeah, they're pretty campy.
But
Don't.
I actually over this summer I got asked to. Originally, I was just going to like be like a speaker and workshop leader at this camp in Florida, and then like last minute they asked me if I would be a counselor because like one of the counselors dropped last minute. I was like, you know what, I'm going to be there. I'll be a camp counselor. Not why not? And let me tell you what, these people had like 10, 15 years of traditions that I just did not resonate with at all. I loved the experience, but just like I had to like suspend my judgment for a minute because it was just they were their own people, and I loved that. In the end, I kind of like grew to love it, but at very first, it's like I think that's anybody who comes into any sort of Christian circle. It's like when I'm like going on dates now and I'm explaining to people, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, I go to a Baptist church, and they're just like, wait, what? Like
What does
like,
all that mean?
it's like why are you doing that? I'm just
Yeah,
like
I
love Jesus, okay.
I think it's one of the things too. Like when you have such a strong community, it's whatever that community is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it, we'll use that word tradition in associated with that social circle. For everyone that's in there, we talk about the Christian bubble a lot, right? You get
Mm-hmm.
really accustomed, and you just believe that the whole world is like this, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
really. It's your world that's like that in that particular place. But are you hearing that? Like my
No, I don't hear anything besides your beautiful voice.
Okay. My email just went off in my ear and it was very distracting. Sorry about that.
You're fine.
But like Christians aren't the only ones that do it. And like one of the examples I think of was like the first time I went to a lesbian bar. And
Yes.
I wasn't going as just like somebody else who was just going to have a couple drinks. I was going as a musician. I'd never been inside a bar, like a gay bar of any kind before. I had no idea what gay culture in America was like. I always kind of just been around as me, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I was actually really terrified of walking in. I don't know why. I don't know what I was afraid of, but
Mm-hmm.
um, not afraid of like bodily harm or something like that, but just knowing that I was going to an environment that had been glorified in some ways, like in movies, and I knew was going to be
The L word, things like that.
like it was this experience that I just knew that I didn't have this social experience for, and I was going to look awkward or weird or whatever. I didn't know how to handle myself
You know how to
around.
act.
Yeah, around 100 other lesbians in a bar. Well, it turned out like this was just kind of yes, there were a lot of lesbians there, but there were straight people that came to my show and couples and whatever. And at the same time at this bar, while I was playing, like I was really trying hard not to play any of my Christian stuff. Like I really didn't want to play it. Like I did
Mm-hmm.
not want to do anything even remotely Jesus-y in this place. Like I just couldn't do it. And all these girls were like, sing this or we'll get really mad. Like they started basically chanting for the songs in their tradition. Like for them, when they were experiencing me and my music, they traditionally came together and were singing, some of the older music. I was like, wow. And that taught me, like, that was such a beautiful moment, I think, for me, because it taught me like that even though I was in this foreign environment, and there are a lot of people there in their world, they invited me into this place in a way that allowed me to live in it. And I think that sometimes what we forget, when we're trying to hold on to a tradition and build a culture around it, that at the same time, like one of the beauties of a tradition is being able to invite other people into it and say, hey, we hope that you can enjoy this, not you have to enjoy it, or use it as some kind of mechanism to know who belongs and who doesn't. It's a really nuanced thing, but I know that there have been times that I felt really weird in other environments that I didn't grow up with. And the distinction for me is just when that group or that community gives me a way in to understand it. It doesn't make me feel like an idiot because I don't know how, you know, how and why some of these things work so much for that social group.
Mm. Dang. That's lovely.
I've stunned you like a mullet.
No, I love that. Well, like here's also the true tea is that usually like I will say like in I don't know, like here's the thing about me. I talk a whole freaking lot. So when someone else can talk just as much as me, it's always very surprising and exciting for me because I'm just like, yes.
Oh gosh.
So since like getting back into your music career, which was like 2009, right?
Yeah, right about then.
What's been like your favorite shows that you've played? Like, what's kind of your favorite places to show up in?
Oh man, I don't know. I mean, I'm doing a ton of bar shows, you know, like, and I don't know, like some of the coolest nights are like some of the skankiest nights, like where it's like a skanky bar, and I'm like wondering what the hell I'm doing in there, and it's hot and it's sweaty and it's awful, but like if the crowd's into it, I'm into it, you know. So I mean, I don't know if there's been one particular place, but you know, I've been doing a lot of pubs and clubs around the country, and I've appreciated being able to be near my audience. I just always feel like in those environments that I'm having a conversation with people, and I feel less like I've sold a ticket and I'm here to perform for you and look at me. Cause I've never really felt real comfortable with that. I've always, when back in the day when I was playing in arenas and, you know, and into big auditoriums with 15 and 2,000 people, like I like that from time to time, but there's a point where it gets so sterile because you can't really see everybody and you can't really feel people.
It's very much just like, it's almost like I'm going to create this piece of art on this stage and you're going to enjoy it and then I'm going to go, rather than like sitting in front of someone and having like just a real intimate moment of sharing.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, like I've introduced some of my favorite moments actually have been like I've been able to play some new songs when I go out because, you know, I'm practicing and letting songs, you know, playing them before I record them. And when I go play them, and I remember there was a spate before the Set Me Free record where I was playing some of these new songs, and I get done playing with it, and I'm like, I don't, you know, and I'm kind of insecure because people don't know it, right? And the audience is just listening, and they're they're dead quiet, and they're all just looking at me. And I get done, and people don't even clap for like, not when you expect them to. Like they're waiting, you know, like it feels like forever. And then you hear people go, whoa. Like I would hear people just go, oh, or like make some kind of audible noise of just release. And I was like, oh shit, what did I just do? This sucks. Does it suck that bad that you guys just don't even know what to do? And I was really freaked out about it one night. And then slowly, you know, people would start clapping. But after they got done, I was like, what was that? And the audience is like, we're speechless. We don't even know what to say. Like,
yeah,
and I was like,
it's the best.
That's the kind of feedback that, you know, like becomes conversational. It's almost like sitting around a campfire, you know, and going, okay, man, it's your turn to play. You play us a song and everybody talks about it. You move on to the next guy.
I know that feeling so well. Definitely different context. So when I studied choral music education in college, so I was constantly singing in choirs and concerts and all sorts of stuff. And we got to perform this piece that my friend Carrie wrote, which is a setting of Emily Dickinson's There Is Another Sky, which is my favorite poem because of that. But it was such a beautiful piece of music. But like, it was like, there's been so many moments when creating music with other people where just, it's like you create this incredibly holy moment through song. And it's just like, you know, anyone who is able to experience that is also just kind of like in awe of like how the veil between this world and the next got incredibly thin in that moment.
Yeah,
you know,
I like that you say that because I think that's where I take it too. Like there, as a performer, sometimes, you know, you get to the end of that space, right? You've been making all this noise, and then you get there, and everybody's quiet. And I've never really taken that on as like my own achievement.
Oh yeah.
Like I look up, like sometimes I'm surprised in those moments. I look up and I'm like, oh shit, there are all these people here. Where'd you guys come from?
Yeah.
Because I'm
I was
having
over here.
yeah, so I'm having a moment, and then I realize that we're all having this moment together, and to be able to be, I mean, I feel like those kind of intimate environments have been ones that have taught me a lot about, you know, re- not being afraid to be like uh, intimate, or not being afraid to like really find something special in playing and reaching out. It is a spiritual experience, and I don't think you necessarily
Mhm.
have to usher up a religion, but it's an opportunity to share something with people, and it's an unusual thing to stand up as a single person in front of 200 other
Mhm.
sets of eyes. That's totally peculiar, but
Yeah.
to be able to do that in a way where I think at times where I feel like I kind of disappear, and I don't know, this thing that happens with music happens, is to me one of like the
Mhm.
most, I mean, I wouldn't say that that happens, all the time, but it happens with enough frequency. You're like, oh man, I'm going to try that again. Like you don't even
Mhm.
try it really. You just hope that it happens. And in order to get there, you just kind of have to release yourself to it and allow it to enter into the room.
Mhm. That makes me think of a couple experiences like I've had where, or it's just like in general, like that people understanding like you know how people like sometimes will just go from like, this is again Christian talk, going from conference to conference, and they just get conference high, and they're just like conference Christians, and they go to this place and they just get their life totally wrecked by Jesus, and then they're going to go back to their community and like change the world because they had this one experience, but generally they just are chasing high after high. um I think what I like about music in particular and getting to perform music um, is that when you understand that it's not about that moment, it's not about like constantly getting this euphoric state, but it's about like the practice of everything around it. I think it's almost just like yoga sometimes. It's just like, you're not practicing yoga because you can do a headstand. You're practicing yoga so that you can like be in your body.
Yeah,
Or
it's
like, so I think music's kind of something similar. It's just like we don't create music because we're like looking to transcend to another like spatial plane. We're doing it because like we know that it exists.
now you're getting into an area that I'm just like, with like popular music, which, don't get me wrong, I like popular music, and I've gone to plenty of shows of pop musicians, but I've been, like when I listen to the radio, sometimes I'm like, man, I work too hard. Like
You really do
I
work too
wanna,
hard.
I wanna, when I pick up my guitar and I think that I've got to stand up in front, and I realize that what's ahead of me is to stand up in front of people. Like, I don't want to just, for me, I don't know. Like, I don't want to just stand up in front of people for the sake of everyone glorying over my presence there.
Yeah.
I want to share something. Like, I want to have like, I'm going to sound so cheesy, but I want to have hope in who we are. And it's a
Hmm.
collective, to me it's a collective experience. And I don't know, like in music today, and in our our highly amped up visual entertainment culture,
Hmm.
I, I miss those days where I used to listen. I mean, I, everybody's walking around with headphones on their heads all the time, and I'm just kind of like, I do that with my headphones on at home with my eyes closed, so I can get lost in it. Like, when I listen to music, I want to listen to it. I really do want to feel it, and I want to
Hmm.
understand. I want to allow it to take me to some place. And that's not to say that I don't think, like EDM can't do that. I think it can. I don't want to slight any other genre, but I think that to me is what makes the artist over time, to me, stand out, or those people who invite me into their world and share something with me rather than just say, look at me, look at me.
Hmm. Um, Question for you. And I'm sure you've talked about this other places, and I just haven't heard you talk about it. But when you were in Australia and like working through, your reconciling the faith and sexuality thing, um, when you were like, what was music for you like then? Because for so long it was your career in like CCM land. Was it was it quite painful to still
Oh
hold on
God, it was
to?
like absolute kryptonite. Like, I hated it. Like, I couldn't. I can hear music. Like, don't get me wrong, like, because kind of music's everywhere. But if anything moved me, like, I would turn it off like immediately. Like the second it would start to, like, I would. It was like it was just at the quicks. It would just be so painful to me, and it took me a long time to sort out why. Like at first, I thought I was mad. You know, and I don't know. In a lot of ways, I went through the stages of grief because when I quit music in 2002, the story I tell is, you know, I literally played my last gig in 2002, and I put my guitars in the case, and I was like, fuck it, that's it. Like I'm not doing this anymore. And I thought that portion of my life was over, and so I tried to compartmentalize it and say that, you know, good riddance to bad rubbish, you know. But as you know, in those times when I would hear music, I would find myself just, you know, like the stages of grief. I went through anger, I wept, I cried, you know, I went through all of it until eventually I just missed it so much. That process took like 7 years for me to even be able to turn on the radio and hear anything. And like, I remember actually, Katie Hudson was doing her tour in Australia when I was there. So just after I Kissed a Girl, you know, was taking off, and because I wasn't listening to the radio, I had no idea. But I turned on the telly, and
you're talking about Katy Perry.
Yes, Katy Perry. Did I say Katie Hudson?
You did. I was like, I think that's who she's talking about, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, Katie Hudson or Katy Perry. Of course, I knew her in her CCM days as Katie Hudson, but I turned on the telly and she was there, and I just started weeping. Like, but I watched it because I knew her, and I was like, it kind of, you know, this person just appeared out of nowhere, kind of for me, and I was just like, what was going on? And it was just I almost had a full blown panic attack looking at it, and I didn't really understand why. You know, but it was part of like just the rage and the sadness and being separated from a craft and a meaningful ritual for me, and performing and playing music, that because of all of the things that I'd associated with it, like being in public with Christianity, it was just all tied up in a big mess. And that it was at that point where I realized like, oh, I am hung up here in ways that I'm not really, you know, I wanted to have more control over that. Like, man, I felt like basically I felt like I'd been robbed of music, and that there were these circumstances that were not allowing me to do that. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to let that happen. Like,
right.
You know, and it had happened for about 7 or 8, you know, for 7 years or so. But I was like, when it dawned on me, I was like, I didn't want to tolerate that anymore. I'm like, okay, I'm going to see if I can pick up my guitars and play again. And I didn't really do that necessarily thinking that I was going to work my way back to the music industry at all. Like, in fact, that was way too terrifying of a thought for me. But I wanted to play. I realized that I didn't journal anymore. You know, I hadn't been journaling. I hadn't been writing. I'd found other creative outlets. I was doing a lot of photography. I was doing some painting, and, you know, some little things like that I wasn't really good at. But I really had it was basically like cutting off a best friend that was just waiting for me. And I didn't want to talk to them until I was ready. And it took a long while, but that was probably the most painful part of it, to be honest.
Yeah, I'll bet. Like you know, not to the same extreme, because like I was never been on your level, probably will never be on your level, because I don't think they're going to sign like a gay worship artist right now. I don't think that's a thing that CCM is doing. But if they would...
Well, I don't think it's on levels. You know, I seriously wouldn't qualify that as levels, though. I mean, I think there's, you know, there's a universality to that experience, right? Where that things are stolen. And I think this is part of the thing that I communicate a lot in my advocacy work inside the church is, you know, imagine the sacred things being taken away from you. Like the things that add fruit and meaningfulness to your life. And it doesn't, there are wildly different things for different people. And to me, this, you know, there may be some things to another, you know, when I go, I can't really perform anymore. I feel like I can't perform anymore, that I'm not an earnest player. You know, musicians are maybe going to relate to how terrifying and excruciating that experience is, but for somebody who, you know, only sings in the shower, they were like, yeah, do something else. Like, no. You don't understand, I'm missing an arm here. Like, that's it right there. Yeah, it's a tearing in your soul. And I think we can all experience that way. And the public has nothing to do with it. In fact, I think
Mm-hmm.
for me, the fact that I got to do that in private, I don't know, there was something about that. Like, I think I knew that was coming in some way. And so I was really grateful to be able to have that on a private level. But, and I think even like, I think that's kind of what prompted my leaving in 2002 is just like some of the wrestling that I had to do in extricating like who I was as a musician, who I was as a person of faith, if I was even going to continue to be one, who I was as a woman, who I was as an LGBTQ person. Like all of these things were just bound up in this whole like professional aura of life that I had. I was Jennifer Knapp, the Christian rock star, whatever the hell that meant. And I didn't even know that at the time, but like I knew, like somehow or other, I knew that there were a lot of people outside of me that expected me to be a certain way that I knew that I wasn't. And then I knew that I wasn't going to be able to achieve. But at the same time, I was getting to the point where I didn't have the courage to figure out how I wanted to be. Mm-hmm. And that's a really strange place to be in. Like, it's like, it's like trying to walk on water. It's just, it's an impossible thing to do. If you don't know who you are, when things are quiet and you're by yourself and kind of have some fundamentals of how to explain yourself. When the temperature gets turned up, that's harder to achieve, right? And so it's this feeling of just sinking. And it took me a long time to kind of get to that place. But to me, that wasn't just about being a musician. It wasn't just about being a Christian, or it wasn't just about being gay. Like there were all of these things going, man, I don't even know how to be a well-rounded human being. So I'm going to just tell all of those other things to take a back seat for a little while. And I'm going to concentrate on becoming a human being. Mm-hmm. One last thing is like the thing that I often say is like, I didn't know the sound of my own voice, like in my head, all of the kind of running dialogue that happens in our heads when we're thinking, and I didn't know which one was mine. Like I didn't know which one was the church, which one was, everybody else.
That is so real, because I just need to like put that on a quote book. Just like, I didn't know which voice in my head was mine. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that describes it perfectly. Like I led worship like all through like high school and the beginning of college, and then took some time off because I didn't know what to do. But like I remember like I was in the closet and still leading worship, and then when I got kicked out of worship land and kicked out of like evangelical missions world, like it was that same exact feeling of just like, I hate this so much. I hate everything worship music. I hate everything that has to do with like that kind of stuff. But like I missed it so much. And then fast forward like a year and a half later, I got to lead worship at, GCN, at like one of the biggest national conferences that queer Christians have. And being able to walk into that space and like with my full self, like there's nothing like it. It was like kind of like what you said, like being reunited with a part of yourself that like you just could not, like you can't live without it.
And this is a part where I'm going to sound like a little bit Christian, if not a lot.
A little Christian. Okay.
Oh my God, do not label the title of this podcast that.
Okay, I'm going to tell you right now, like I can't guarantee that. It's just like Jennifer Knapp is a little Christian.
Oh my God. I'm trying so hard not to be labeled, but here's the thing. Like,
sorry.
There's like the processes we go through, right? All of that anger and that rage. I mean, when somebody's hurt you or a process has disappointed you or we lose something, we grieve and we go through hate and rage and anger. And it's a valid thing to go through, right? And I think a lot of LGBTQ people inside of the church have gone through this process, where you're just like, I don't know, for me, I was like, I am never stepping foot in a church again. Thank God. Mm-hmm. Like, thank God I'm gay. Like, I don't have to go back. I finally had the excuse that, all of the frustrations that I had experienced with Christianity, I could go, oh, well, I'm not welcome. But at the same time, like, we were talking about like this missing kind of element or this missing something meaningful about that. What was me? I had to ask myself, okay, like finally one day I kind of admitted, yeah, I'm really pissed off. I feel really, uninvited sometimes, or angry or ashamed, or kind of a lot of negative things associated with say, with church as an example. But at the same time, like, how do I explain the loss? Like, how do I explain the fact that I really do want to be able to engage in non I want to be able to engage my spirituality, and
Mm-hmm.
I miss that, and something is not right with me when I'm not. Like, so
Right.
how do I reconcile those two things? And I don't know, like, some it wasn't like wasn't like I wasn't in therapy at this particular time, but I
Mm-hmm.
think one of the things that I got out of that was just that's my mode, is I just turn straight to that stuff and I look at head on. I'm going, okay, what are you pissed about? And I would kind
Mm-hmm.
of go through and be honest with myself of what I was mad about. And I would say, oh, I'm never. And then I kind of learned pretty quickly, like, never doesn't really work. Um,
Yeah.
like, there are a lot of things I say never to every once in a while, and I realize that it doesn't work that way. But at the same time, I guess it's all to say is that, with a little bit of time and kind of like going through that, I actually evaluated it. I didn't just like say, okay, this hurts and therefore I'm mad. I would like, well, why am I mad, and why is this hurting, and what do I want to do about that? And
Mm-hmm.
so and just processing through these lists of questions, okay, well, what do I want to do about that? And like right now, honestly, nothing.
Yep.
And being okay with that, and then but at the same time giving yourself permission, maybe, a few years on, to say, I might go back. I don't know. But the redemptive quality of that, to be able to say, I guess the part of that for me was that my anger and rage that was however justified for the kind of sideways spiritual experience that I'd had with the church,
Mm-hmm.
I just refused to allow that negative experience at the place and time where I experienced it color the entire process and color
Right.
it, for all cultures, for all of Christianity. It was just a place and it was just a time, and I wanted to see if there was something redeemable about it. And
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, I think that's what my faith has kind of really taught me, is to kind of go through and not just judge for the sake of judging, but what is redemptive about this experience? Like, can I
Mm-hmm.
find something good here? And more often than not, I do. It doesn't mean that I necessarily keep it. It doesn't necessarily mean that I fully participate or fully go back.
Mm-hmm.
But I
I
shudder
think,
to think, if I hadn't have done that, how differently my life would be right now.
yeah, the thing you said about like anger, like I can't remember where I read it or heard it, but someone once said like that anger is like jet fuel. It like burns bright and it burns fast, but at the end of it, like it's gone so quickly. And at the end of it, like, if you don't have enough to sustain you, you're just going to crash and burn because I think that's what anger does. At least that's what anger does to me. Like anger is like my go-to. I'm an Enneagram 8. And so I love fun, but I'm also angry all the time. So like I like as I like I think that's the kind of like I hate using like words that are almost coming cliche, like deconstruction and things like that, because everyone's like, I'm deconstructing right now. I don't want to do anything with faith right now. So I'm like, you're just being lazy. You need to figure out what you believe, because right now, like, mostly because I want to radicalize everybody. That's really why I want people to figure their shit out.
Well, maybe here I'm going to go to songwriter mode. Like, maybe an alternative to deconstruction is developing an awareness.
Yes.
An awareness of what the components are. And I think that's, yes, deconstruction is kind of an academic way that we talk through, like modern, like we're contemporary talking about some of these issues. But in that, it's not just like pulling everything apart and laying it on the table. It's like being aware of how each one of these things work, how they fit together, and really, looking at the value of each one of those kinds of things. And that's kind of maybe where I move into awareness. And if we use kind of Twitter as an example, right, where everybody just gets on and just slams you the second that you make a mistake. And not that calling out the broken things isn't important. It is. But at some point, like, the value of that is lost if we don't say, okay, look, I recognize that this thing is broken. Have an awareness of what that is, and to begin and do what you need to do. Like, if you're angry, fine. You're going to have to process that. We're normal. We're going to be upset and disappointed and all of those things. But the value of that moment is like, like with any strong sensation, right? When your brain sends a signal to your hand that you've touched a fire and you pull your hand away because it's hot, like, you should be learning something from that experience. Why am I angry? That's the next step. Why am I angry? what do I want to do about it? And how am I going, what is the meaning of this point? Just because it's a bad point, which, how do we not repeat that event? And that to me is like the harder work. Yes, we can, it's easy to tear anything down, right? But it's really hard to build something back up that stands and that lasts.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess another question I always ask people is just say, well, what do you want? What do you actually, what do you need and what do you want? Because I think those are like really important things. Do you and I always tell people, that's something that my family differs on me on is like, if you don't want to go back into like a spiritual community, like a church, then don't go back.
Don't. Right.
If you find a different spiritual tradition that works for you, good, go with God. Because like where you're coming alive, that's where God exists anyways.
Yeah, I think that's where I get the most trouble with most Christians is like, I give people permission to absolutely never go back.
Oh, I tell people, I'm like, listen, I stay because I've got thick skin and elastic heart, and I'm just kind of petty, and I want to win. That's what it comes down to.
But I love that though, like what you're saying though, because like, what do you want? Like I've been like that in my life too. Like I used to spend years being just angry. Like somebody would do something wrong, right, and I would just get mad, and I'd just be in this little tizzy and just be yelling and all this kind of stuff. And one day it was just like, well, what do you want? I mean, like, I don't know. You just realize you're like, in this fury about whatever, and not like. I'd never asked myself that before. And the second that dramatically changed how long I get angry now. Like, and I'm not suggesting that's necessarily a silver bullet for everybody, but it's part of that contemplation, right? It's like, what am I actually upset about? And like some days I'm like, my answer is, I just want to be mad at you right now. That's all I got. Like, I've just got flat outrage for you, man. And the next is like, no, I was amazed how many times my anger was centered to how sad and hurt and disappointed I was. Just because somebody asked me like, what are you? And I was like, oh, I realize that I'm yelling and screaming right now, but I'm actually really sad. And then the switch would flip and I'd just be in tears. And
oh, that's the same thing for me. Like anger is like, almost like if it was like a wall of fire, and like once you get through that little wall of fire, I'm just literally just a little guy over in the corner who's like very upset about everything that's happening and feels out of control.
Yeah.
That's usually like what it like. My therapist has said, like, when I've recounted moments where I've blown up on somebody, she's like, no, like who was talking in that moment? Was it actually like, 28-year-old Kevin, or was that 8-year-old Kevin?
Yeah, I don't know my psychological research data very well, but I'd bet there's a pretty massive adrenaline push in our bodies when we get that rush of shame or disgrace or, whatever that anger comes up. It's probably like that fight or flight response where we're getting that big push of chemicals where we're just reacting in that way.
Oh yeah. For me, like, shame, like breaking down the brain science of it, it's like shame hits you and people react differently to shame. I react in anger. I don't want it. I don't want that to be on me, even though I'm already feeling it really deeply. And so as a way to like offset that, the amygdala kicks in, says fight or flight. I always say fight. The adrenaline kicks in, prefrontal cortex is like out the window, no reasoning whatsoever, just go, fight, win.
Yep.
And
I like
by
style.
that point, that's my go-to. And it takes me, when at my best, I am nuanced and measured and I can slow down and take a breath. And like, I recognize it more now, but at my worst, like, you better not DM me something stupid in the middle of the day, because I will take you to task on it, because I wasn't expecting you to try and shame me in my inbox.
But but that's like where, when you ask like, well, what do I want out of this situation? And then all of a sudden you start to realize that when you do actually figure out what you want, you realize that the way you're acting right now is not going to get you what you want.
Ugh, isn't it the worst?
it's usually for me, it adds further humiliation. But
yeah. Ugh. What, do you know your Enneagram type by chance?
I don't officially know, but
well, I guess we have to kick you out of progressive Christianity world because you just don't know.
And yet another way I've failed to fit in over the years.
Wow.
I think I'm actually getting ready to do a podcast here in the next week with an Enneagram specialist. So I've kind of been holding off. I've been diagnosed. because I've never done it myself, but like multiple people have like kind of quizzed me and determined that I'm a 5. But I'm kind of waiting because this podcast specialist of Enneagrams is going to go do one. We're going to do one live on air, so I thought it'd be quite fun.
Oh, that will be fun. Well, yeah. At least speaking, like listening to how you speak like a lot of 5s I know. So
Great.
That's not a bad thing. 5s are like some of my favorite people. They're incredibly logical. They know a shit ton about everything, and generally have well-rounded. They have really well-rounded opinions about stuff. It's usually like based off of their actual research and facts, along with their experience. So
that I'm already like bored. I'm just saying, like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, you got me.
Go ahead and just cancel that interview and say, hey, just play, like, you guys can have 2 minutes from this other podcast I was on. Throw that on the air. And
listen to that before you give your diagnosis. That's what I'm calling it, as a diagnosis. I know that's totally not the right.
I think the proper, quote unquote, proper term when we're talking about a pseudo, like, it's not even like scientifically proven that the Enneagram is actually like factual or psychological. It's just like it's worked for so many people that it's like, whoop, there it is.
But here's the thing that I love about it, though, is kind of like tying it back into our conversation a bit. Like one of the biggest and this sounds really weird, but one of the biggest revelations to me in my finding my own voice journey, right, was to realize that I was an introvert. And like, right, you're either an introvert or an extrovert, and there's stuff I'm sure that's on a spectrum at a certain point, but I didn't really understand that about myself. And I think because I do talk a lot and I'm very, forward facing to most people, because I'm not shy, right? But I am an introvert, and I'd never really made that connection. And when I started I started reading on like what introvert personalities do and how they refuel, and understanding the way that kind of personality type works really equipped me a lot better to make better decisions that about like what I wanted to do. Like when I was answering those, well, what are you mad about and what do you want? Those kinds of things. I was all of a sudden, in understanding my introverted nature, I realized that, man, for example, my profession, right? It's a very extroverted profession. I go out, I'm on stage, I spend 2 or 3 hours a night talking to hundreds of different people. When I'm done, I am done. Like I'm so exhausted, I'm so empty. And that was, in the past, that really gave me a lot of depression, because I didn't really understand that I had to refuel and I had to reconnect. And tying that like into Enneagram thing, I think that's part of knowing your own self, right? And knowing your own voice, and whatever, these tools are being useful for a lot of people, not just going, oh, wow, there are people like me. I'm not a freak of nature, because, there's not something like, it's a validation of the ways that we are, right? That there are blocks of people that are, like me,
very similarly wired.
Yeah, I'm hopelessly logical, and it totally screws with my songwriting. And for me, right? Like I want to cut loose, and I want to be fantastical and think just wildly creative thoughts, but my brain sometimes won't let me do it. But because I know that, like that's one of the things I actually do know about myself. I'm really structured. And so because I do know that, I know that there are exercises that I can go through, or give myself permission to be a little bit wild and crazy, or, going, I know you don't want to try this, and it doesn't make sense, but give it a go and see what happens. And, being able to kind of toy with those things, because I'm confident about, where I'm positioned in the universe.
You still there?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I didn't know if you had like, that was like, it got so quiet. I'm like, wait, is she done?
Where was the exhale?
That's brilliant.
And the sigh?
Yeah. I think that I'm just getting used to the cadence of your voice, because you know how some people will like have like I'm talking, and then this is the end of my point.
Sorry, I didn't give you the resolved chord.
No, please don't ever. I love a good unresolved chord. I'm a jazz musician, so like I sing jazz all the time, and I want to end on something disgusting and weird every time. And
that hurts me so much. You have no idea. I had a music professor once, one of my music theory teachers, who would walk into a class and play an unresolved chord, like right at the start of the thing, for an hour. I would be like OCD ADD, I don't know, like some kind of clinical agitated for the next 60 minutes. But you'd forget about the chord. And then at the end of the class, he would resolve the chord, like disconnected. He would just play an hour apart, the resolution. And all of a sudden I could just feel my body just relax. And I was like, man, that was just the worst torture. I think it actually affected my grades in that class, to be honest. Like, it was just so disturbing to me because I needed.
And he probably thought he was just like a funny fucker out here.
He probably did. He didn't know that he was screwing around with my brain.
Ugh, I am sorry for that. I had one piano professor. He wasn't cruel, but he was really insensitive. Like, I had a friend of mine who was she's albino, and because of that, she also has like vision impairedness.
Yeah. And
she was like, he just made the hugest deal out of the fact that she was blind. Like, in our music class, it was like just the worst. And then I had another professor who was such a germaphobe. When I went to his studio for like one of my piano lessons and I sneezed, he kicked me out of his room because he didn't want to get sick.
Nice. Social skills.
Yeah, something that music majors I don't think have a lot of. But,
you spend a lot of time in practice rooms by yourself, repeating 8 bars at a time for hours on, like the same 8 bars for 8 hours. I think it does a little something to you.
A little bit. And here's the thing. I wasn't the best music student in the world. I took 5 years to get my music degree, and I was involved with everyone on campus and became the homecoming king. So, like, that's the level of practice I was doing.
No musician, no serious musician gets to be a homecoming king. I'm just saying.
Well, I mean, I'll be real with you. Like, I consider myself a good enough musician, but I'm a much better speaker than I am a writer, and I'm a much better singer than I am a full blown musician. That's for sure. I can arrange people. I can direct a whole band. I can do all the stuff I need to do. I just don't like it.
Well, that's a whole other level. I gave that stuff up a long time ago, man. I play my 6-string 4 chords, and I'm pretty happy these days.
Good. I'm proud of you. Okay, so we're getting towards the end of our time, and I know that you have to go live your life. I am going to go to a dance party called Smothered and Covered. So, you want to come?
See, that sounds like an extrovert extravaganza and an introvert nightmare.
It's in the basement of this little bar in East Atlanta Village. It's like a bunch of like indie DJs and a bunch of like ballroom dance. And by ballroom dance, I mean like voguing ballroom.
See, I was imagining something wildly more erotic.
Oh, no. It's basically just like, it's called Smothered and Covered because it's like a southern delicacy type deal, I think.
Like
great.
Like my hash browns that I get at Waffle House.
Exactly, Hanny. Exactly.
That was my conversation with the fantastic Jennifer Knapp. You can get in touch with Jennifer across social media at Jennifer_Knapp. That's Knapp. And on her website, JenniferKnapp.com. Pick Up Love comes back around wherever you get your music from. And be sure to check out her tour, which is coming through Alabama and Florida. Today, actually, if you're listening to this tonight, she's going to be at St. Augustine in Florida at Cafe 11. Tomorrow in Tampa, Florida at The Attic. And on the 18th in Mobile, Alabama, in the listening room. So tour dates are continuing in the spring. Again, go to jenniferknapp.com/shows to learn all about that. Jennifer, girl, I love you. I can't wait to hang out again. I can't wait to hang out in IRL. It's going to be amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show. A Tiny Revolution is supported by amazing folks on Patreon, 137 of them to be exact. And if you don't know what Patreon is, it is literally the easiest way to support the creatives in your life that are making the content that matters. So if you thought that this conversation was important, if any of the blogs, podcasts, or videos that I'm making are helpful to you, I would seriously love for you to become a sustaining partner over on Patreon. Not only are you supporting me as a creative, but you're also getting some sweet perks, including free t-shirts at certain levels, a Slack channel that's really active with amazing people just like you to help you build community and find your place in the movement. And on top of that, we've also got a new podcast coming out soon called Decent Advice, which is something I started on the very first couple episodes of the show and then discontinued because it felt too disjointed. But I get more cues in my inbox every single day, and so I am trying to answer them in public so that maybe if you have a question, you can also answer it. So if you want to submit a question for Decent Advice, go to thekevingarcia.com/askme, or you can call the Decent Advice hotline at 404-507-2625. Just leave a voicemail and you may hear your voice on the podcast. You're going to hear the A version of Decent Advice right here in your Tiny Revolution stream, I believe starting on Sunday. And then after that, what's going to be really cool is that if you are a Patreon supporter at $5 a month or more, you're going to get the extended version of all of those conversations. So I feel like the Decent Advice podcast is probably only going to be around like 15, 20 minutes long. But if you want like a longer, like an hour-long conversation that's a little bit more frank, it's going to be me and my friends and people just answering questions that you might find interesting. So become a Patreon supporter at $5 a month. Get the true T version of Decent Advice. And yeah. So that's one of the great things about Patreon. You're not only helping support the work, but you're also getting something in return. So yeah, patreon.com/thekevingarcia. I think I've talked too much about this, but I think that covers it all. If you haven't, go to qchristian.org, get your tickets, come see me and Jennifer Knapp at the Q Christian Fellowship Conference. And I love you. I think you're amazing. Thank you so much for all the support that you've been pouring out these past few weeks. I'm excited for the new phase of work. Go to the YouTube channel. Go over to find me on all the social medias, thekevingarcia.com. And don't forget to leave a rating for this podcast in the iTunes store. It seriously helps get this podcast in front of people who need to hear a better word about their life. So until next time, make sure that you go see your therapist, take your meds, drink some water, eat something delicious, move your body, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. We're going to make it through, fam. Fight the good fight. Listen to some really good music. I have been really chilling on SZA's album again for a while. It just really does it for me. Also, don't sleep on Willow. The song Wait a Minute, that's going to get you your whole life, honey. So again, this has been another episode of A Tiny Revolution. I'm Kevin Garcia, and I will talk to you next time, honey. Bye.